Welcome to the Daily Faceoff Show, your everyday source for the latest news with top-notch insight and analysis. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
It is a Stanley Cup high in the Mile High State. Why not? Mike McKenna, Tyler Yaremchuk with you for a June 27th edition of the Daily Faceoff Show. And Mike, boy, that was a really good ending to what was just a tremendous playoffs across the board in the NHL.
I was happy to see it be a 2-1 game and something that had some drama up until the very end, and a deserving winner in the Colorado Avalanche. Like, when you look at how they played over the whole course of the season, not just playoffs, Tyler, I think the right team came out on top, and it's always fun to see the cup presented. But the problem is now, like, what do we do with ourselves, man? Like, what are you going to do later today? Do you know what? I don't know what to do, man. There's no hockey to watch now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's time to fill up your calendar with summer activities, I suppose. Just quickly before we really dig into things, everyone loves a good underdog story, but you mentioned a deserving champion. There's something I love about seeing great players get their due. There's no conversation, in my opinion, that's more nauseating than, like we did with Alex Ovechkin for so many years. Like, oh, he's great, but he doesn't have a ring. He doesn't have a ring. And people do the ring counting thing. And for me, seeing MacKinnon and now even Makar and guys like that get their ring, get their title, as a hockey fan, I really enjoy seeing great players and great teams sort of get their due.
Yeah, man. Like, it's you think about somebody like Landeskog or Eric Johnson. Like, you grind for so long at Cogliano. You can go all down the list of people on that Avalanche team. Yeah. It's special, and it almost validates a career. And if you're like me, like, who never won one, who came close a couple times to getting a championship, like, without question, I'll tell you, Tyler, that's what's missing from my career. Never won a championship. These guys don't have to worry about it in Colorado any longer.
It really was great to see all the reactions after the game. We're going to get into a bunch of that. So let's throw 2 minutes and 30 seconds up on the clock. And before we look back at last night, let's look back to a moment that came last season when the Colorado Avalanche were eliminated from the playoffs by the Vegas Golden Knights. And this was Nathan MacKinnon after that game.
For sure. I mean, there's always next year. It's all we talk about. I feel like, I'm going in my 9th year next year and I haven't won shit. So I'm just definitely motivated, and I'm just, it just sucks, losing 4 in a row to a team. And, it felt like last year was our first real chance to win. And this year I thought we were the best team in the league. For whatever reason, we just couldn't get it together. And I'm sure in training camp next year, we'll figure it out and dissect things and come back better.
We'll take 2 more here for Nathan. Adrian.
I know we don't swear on this show, but it's appropriate to say Nathan MacKinnon has won shit now. He got to raise the Stanley Cup last night. And what a game 6 for Nate Mack as well. He got a goal. He got an assist. He was in on both those Avalanche goals, 7 shots on net as well. There was a moment in that game where I thought, if MacKinnon gets one more, is he going to maybe do something here to make the Conn Smythe vote interesting? And we'll get into that in just a second. But let's start with the big gun for the Avs, Mike. Nathan MacKinnon gets his ring. And, he was full marks in that clinching game. Their star came through for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially early in the first period, you could see the level of energy and desire that was there for MacKinnon. And that wasn't something that really wavered throughout all the playoffs. And what was impressive to me was how hard Tampa played against him. Stamkos, huge hit on MacKinnon. Like, the Lightning were targeting him from a physical standpoint, and he was able to battle through. And even, being on the ice for the first Lightning goal that Stamkos scored, the only Lightning goal, sometimes that can bring a person down, and it seemed to motivate MacKinnon. And Tyler, the takeaway for me was the interview that he gave between the second and third periods that we saw on television here in the U.S. I've never seen somebody who seemed like so focused as MacKinnon. Like, he was absolutely straight faced. It was almost like he couldn't give the interview because he was right on the precipice of winning that Stanley Cup. And having that in the back of your head, man, what those past years have done to you. We've seen this with teams. You have to learn how to lose before you win. Ultimately, the last couple of years were something that not just fueled MacKinnon, but what gave that entire team the knowledge of what it takes to get over the hump and get this victory and win a Stanley Cup championship.
You mentioned an interview he gave on TV in the U.S. Up here in Canada, after the game, he gave an interview with Sportsnet's Kyle Bukauskas, and Bukauskas asked him about how, he's been to 2 Stanley Cup parties in Cole Harbour, his hometown, with Sidney Crosby. And MacKinnon's response was, I was the drunkest guy at the party for both of his. Sid better be drunk at my party as well. So MacKinnon finally gets to bring the cup home. You mentioned the lessons they learned, though, and that ties back to, again, the heartbreaking clip of MacKinnon from last year. Like, this team, this core of players, It's cliche, but they learned their lessons. And then you take all of that and you look at the third period of last game and how they locked it down. Tampa Bay basically didn't get a shot for 10 minutes of that period to start. We hear all this about the high-powered offense. That's what carried them. But at the end of the day, defense wins championships, and that's what they needed to rely on late in that hockey game, Mike.
And they defended with their speed. You look at the defensive core of that team, and by the way, these players are locked up into the future. I mean, you're looking at Cale Makar, Eric Johnson, Sam Girard, Devon Taves, Bowen Byram. They're all under contract next year. Now, we can talk about Girard's contract probably in a little bit of what may happen there, but these guys can all skate. And it's not just the decor, it's the forwards as well. They didn't give Tampa any space. And to me, Tampa just ran out of gas. They were too injured. They weren't able to keep up with what Colorado was doing, because probably 45 minutes of that game, Tyler, I'd say Colorado dominated 5-on-5. Tampa pushed in the beginning. It got a little bit going in the second, but by that third period, there's nothing. And Tampa didn't get any shots from the low area of the slot. That was all to Colorado's credit and how they were able to defend. Pretty impressive game. And I tell you what, I love Nazem Kadri's interview too, when he told the world they can kiss it, man. You think I'm a liability in playoffs? Here I am. He couldn't even tie his skates. He had a trainer tying his skates to be able to play. Nazem Kadri did. Really amazing stuff from Colorado.
That is really one of those all-time Stanley Cup folklore kind of moments where Nazem Kadri would have sat there having a trainer tie his skates, doesn't have enough in his hands to grip the laces, but he has enough in him to go score a massive OT winner for this hockey team. And a big reason why, as you can see, they're hoisting the Stanley Cup here last night. Another thing quickly, Joe Sakic building a winner. And you talk about what this core group has gone through. There is the core that is the Makars, right? And those new guys that they added, the complementary pieces, someone like Devon Taves, unreal. But then there's this picture of the 5 remaining players of this Avalanche team who were around for the season where they only had 48 points. And you think about all the question marks that would have been around about this Avs team. Is MacKinnon going to be the guy? Is he a true superstar? Landeskog, was he given maybe too much with the captaincy at such an early age? Is Eric Johnson past his prime? Mikko Rantanen was still young in the league there, and how Joe Sakic believed in this core of players and let them continue to grow and complimented them so well. I mean, I just love this photo of 5 guys that would have been through so much heartbreak together, finally getting their moment.
They did. You took care of that very well, Tyler, because these players have been through the bottom and earned their way to get to the top and continue to improve. And even mentioning Joe Sakic, let's not forget about the work that he and Chris McFarland, assistant GM, also Craig Billington, another member of the staff there, have done building out the team to get better as the season went along. No doubt about it. Arturi Lehkonen, Josh Manson, Cogliano, these guys played a huge role in Colorado being able to win. It just shows the level that you have to get to and be able to continue on that track to win a Stanley Cup. But these core players for the Avalanche, by all means, man, you could see it when they were passing the cup around last night, the excitement and just how fulfilled they were. They'd worked their whole lives for this, and they'd really had to go through tough times to get it.
It also takes a little bit of luck to build a Stanley Cup winner. You rob the New York Islanders blind of a player like Devon Taves. And some years, when you come last, you're not always going to win the lottery. But what a lucky break that was for the Avs that they didn't win the lottery. Imagine if the Cale Makar year, if they win that lottery, like they would have loved to, right? In the moment, they're sitting there going, let us pick first. They probably go with Nolan Patrick, Nico Hischier, one of the two. Cale Makar, they fall down all the way to 4th and get this generational defenseman who is now not just a Conn Smythe winner, but the first unanimous Conn Smythe Trophy winner. What a postseason from Cale Makar. 29 points, finishes 3rd in the NHL postseason in scoring, 8 goals, 21 assists. The thing that's most impressive for me is how he's not your conventional defenseman. In the dying seconds of that game, they are up by 1. The puck goes into Tampa Bay's end. Cale Makar is on the Lightning goal line, keeping the puck hemmed in right on there with Victor Hedman. Your defenseman, your number 1 D-man, who you think, all right, he's out there to protect our 1-goal lead. There's dying seconds. You're moments away from a Stanley Cup. You'd think most defensemen would go, I'm playing it safe, sitting back, no odd man rushes. Cale Makar is on the other team's goal line with his speed. He's just so special. I think only the 3rd defenseman now to win the Norris and the Conn Smythe in the same season. Just a remarkable run from number 8.
How long is it until he wins a Hart Trophy as the best player in the league? Because I could see it happening. He might be the best player in the league. And he's 23 years old. Like, we're just kind of getting into prime time here for Cale Makar. And I think the defining moment for me in this postseason, Tyler, was when Makar's skating backwards at the same speed as McDavid, pivots, puts his stick on him, puts him into the corner in that series against Edmonton. And I think that really caught people's attention because it was something that you could put tangible evidence to in how he defends, not just how he plays with the puck and how he can use his speed as an asset. I mean, a 5-point game in game 4 against Edmonton, another stamp. He had 7 points in the finals against the Lightning. I just think that this is such a special player with Makar, and a special job of Colorado realizing what they had and being able to make some decisions in keeping him and being able to get his contract. Because remember, they had Tyson Barrie, and that was a big decision. Well, where are we going to lose? We're going to lose all our power play right-handed shot defenseman here if we let go of Barrie. They knew that they had Cale Makar coming, and they trusted that player, and look what it's turned into, and it's worked out from a salary cap standpoint. And we're going to see Cale Makar there for a long time, Tyler. And I can't predict what this guy's going to do, man. I'm just glad I don't have to face it anymore.
Yeah, it's pretty wild that we got to watch, a player who I believe will go down as one of the best defensemen in NHL history really grow into that number 1 defenseman in the world role over the course of the last few months here. An incredible run from Cale Makar. And yeah, you often think conventionally a small, speedy, puck-moving defenseman, your mind automatically jumps to, well, he's barely a defenseman, probably a liability in his own end. But Makar is transcending that position because you know what? And this isn't even to say that he's not good positionally in his own end. He's great. He is a wildly smart hockey player. But when you skate that well, you pass that well, and you're that smart, you barely have to spend any time in your own end. Like how often, you mentioned the McDavid play. How many great defensive plays from Makar do you remember? Because he's rarely in his own end. It's just snap, boom, out of his end, going back the other way. And I think he's changing the way we look at that position, Mike.
There was one money quote from last night where Gabriel Landeskog was asked, how do you get your team to this level? Something to that effect. And he goes, get yourself a Cale Makar. So I don't think there's any other way to put it, man. Guy's generational.
Yeah, absolutely. Just quickly, one other moment that stands out for me before we wrap up. How great was it? The shot of MacKinnon pushing Landeskog to the bench when he lost his skate blade there in the final minutes. And then up here in Canada, right after they played that on the TV, they played the clip of him pushing Landeskog to go accept the Stanley Cup from Bill Daly as well. Just again, there were so many good moments last night. Like as a hockey fan who had no horse in the race, I was just kicking back with my feet up, enjoying just the celebration and all these great moments that we'll remember for a really long time, Mike.
Yeah, we found out which foot was Landeskog's dominant. He was pushing with his left foot and left skate, even though it didn't have a blade in it, trying to get off the ice. That was hilarious. But yeah, pretty awesome, man. Seeing the cup awarded is always a highlight. I just wish it had been in Colorado. I was rooting for a Game 7 in Colorado.
Yeah, that would have been awesome. Well, let's flip to the other side here. When there's a Stanley Cup winner, there's a Stanley Cup loser. And the Tampa Bay Lightning, while they've made 3 Stanley Cup finals now, their run of consecutive cup wins has come to an end. And yes, our technical producer, Alex Allard, with a little tongue-in-cheek here. Are the Lightning heading towards a rebuild? And obviously, a joke. But there's some truth in every joke. And the question is, how can the Lightning keep this going? I think as you watch them in this playoff run, it was hard. They were banged up. They were, in every sense of the word, limping to the finish line here in this series. And on one hand, them forcing 6 games against this Colorado Avalanche team, this kind of a juggernaut, is wildly impressive. But Mike, they clearly didn't have enough in the tank. So the question is, do they have enough in the tank to rest, regroup? It's another short summer for them. Do they have enough in the tank to go on another run next year, or is this maybe the beginning of the end?
I don't think it's as much how much gas is in the tank as how much work needs to be done to the bodywork and the chassis of this team in terms of repairing it, because the Lightning were so beat up. And Kevin Weeks had a great interview with John Cooper after the game, and Cooper just intimated how many of his players probably shouldn't have been playing. And Braden Point should be out 6 months, yet he's out on the ice again. These were the types of things coming out of Cooper's mouth. And I can't help but think that the injuries just got to be too much for Tampa to really be able to compete with anything beyond their first line against Colorado. So I don't think that the team's in much trouble next year and moving forward. Like, they've got most of their core locked up for the next couple of years. And I do think it could probably be a tad faster if you're going to compete with Colorado. But again, where is the injury factor? If Cirelli's 100%, you're probably probably a little quicker too. They really only have two big UFAs, and that's Andre Palat and Nick Paul. And Nick Paul was a rental. You don't know if they'll be able to keep him around. Palat made $5.3 million this year. He's due for a raise in the cap. The Lightning are right up against the salary cap. So, are they going to have to move somebody out? Does Killorn's $4.45 million for one more year look like something you'd have to part with if you want to keep players? I don't know what's going to happen in Tampa, but I think just even with that core that they have, they're built for success. And with some health and a little bit of luck along the way, Tyler, I think they're going to be just fine in the mix next season again.
Yeah, you mentioned their cap situation. Right now, they're 1.9 over the cap, but once Seabrook goes on LTIR, they'll really have, just under $5 million to spend.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're probably not touching any piece of sort of your big four D-men, Hedman, McDonough, Sergachev, and Chernak. Those guys are probably sticking around. Your bottom six is so cheap that there's not like there's a clear cut, like, okay, we got to dump that guy to get more money. Killorn, I think, is the one guy. One more year on the deal. If you move him out, all of a sudden you're up to, just north of $9 million. That's probably enough to bring back Paul and Palat and run it back with this same group right now. Julian Breezeball is one of the best GMs in the NHL, and he's going to have to get a little creative if he wants to get rid of that Killorn contract without keeping anything or without having to give up too much of a future asset. But, they're still going to have Vasilevsky and Hedman and Kucherov and Stamkos and Point and Cirelli, and it's like this team could very easily go on another run next year.
Yep, you nailed it. Look at the minutes Kucherov was playing in the third period last night, double shifting on the ice every moment you could get. And that's a person who'd had to leave a game earlier in the series. So, with those players that you just rattled off, Vasilevsky, Hedman, Stamkos, Kucherov, Point, like this team's built to contend. It's just a matter of if they can get their health and what little adjustments Breezeball's got to make.
Yeah, and one thing we learned about them this year is that their ability to flip the switch, they finished third in their division, and there was a lot of talk of it's not that easy. You can't just go into Stanley Cup mode automatically. Well, the Lightning kind of showed us that, no, they can. They just flip that little switch come playoff time. They could come fourth in the division next year, and I'm sure they would still be betting odds favorites to win round one because they just have that championship mentality. It is now the offseason, Mike McKenna, and let's kick off our offseason talk with a little new edition of the Blue Paint. The Blue Paint, as always, is delivered by our friends over at DoorDash. And Mike, over the next couple weeks here, we're going to be digging into some goalies who could potentially be on the move this summer. There's some intriguing options on the free agent market, but tonight I want to pick your brain on the three goalies who are on Frank Saravalli's trade targets list. And we're going to do a little goalie matchmaker game. Mike will play the role of Tinder in assigning some goalies to some potential matches for next season. Let's start with the youngest goalie on the list, and that's Devils goalie Mackenzie Blackwood, who's in the rumor mill. What do you think of Blackwood and maybe some potential fits for him?
Well, Blackwood's somebody at this point that probably could use a change of scenery. It hasn't been an easy going in New Jersey. There hasn't been a lot of light at the tunnel. And for whatever reason, it seems like that team has soured on him as their potential number one goaltender into the future. So you're looking at a goalie that's an RFA after this year. He's going to make $2.8 million, which is a pretty palatable number for somebody you think could be a number one. And I'm going to throw teams out here that I think would be interested and would be a fit. They're not necessarily who I think is the best fit or who I would want to match up. But I think for Blackwood, I look at Buffalo, and I consider that a team that, is on the rise. I think they'll be knocking on the door of playoffs next year. I don't know if they'll make it, but they've got good assets and they need some stability in net. They ran through a lot of goalies this year. You could potentially get Blackwood at a pretty good deal. You wouldn't have to give up a whole lot, I would think, and then be able to run him for however long if he gets his game to where you want it to be. So it'd be a good calculated risk for Buffalo. I think Toronto could even be in the mix when you're thinking of Blackwood if things go sideways with Campbell. And I think Jack Campbell, negotiations there, I'd put it probably less than 50% that he's going to end up back in Toronto. I'm not sure where he goes. So maybe Blackwood fits, but I'm not quite sure he has the gravitas there. One place I'd keep an eye on as well is Edmonton. Mike Smith's got a year left on his contract, and I think you're looking for a younger goaltender, a complementary goaltender to Smith that can grow into the role, play a lot of games, and hopefully take over that net. That's something of the trajectory that I see with Blackwood, because to me, he hasn't really grabbed a number one spot. Can he do it? He needs to prove it. And I really think in a place like Buffalo and Edmonton, those are the two that would be built for not just the team, but for Blackwood as well to try to take that next step.
The only thing I would say about the Edmonton idea is I would say there's a less than 50% chance Mike Smith plays next season with what we're hearing and the possible LTIR. And if you're Edmonton, and I think this even goes over to Toronto, but for the Oilers, Stuart Skinner's on an NHL deal. He can't go on waivers anymore. If you're in a make or break year with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl trying to win the Stanley Cup, are you going to roll with two goalies under the age of 25? That would leave me a little bit suspect, but I love the Buffalo pick. I think that'd be a tremendous spot for Blackwood to find his form and potentially grow into a number one. A great chance for the Sabres to take as well. Next up on our list, Mike, is John Gibson, who is at the top of Frank Saravalli's trade bait boards in terms of goaltenders. What do you think about Gibson and some potential landing spots there?
Well, Gibson's going to be 29 years old when next season starts, and he's got a hefty price tag. It's $6.4 million, and it's got 5 years remaining on the deal. And Pat Verbeek is molding the Anaheim Ducks into his vision. And at that age and at that dollar figure, is Gibson the goalie of the future and the present for the Anaheim Ducks? And knowing that he could probably get what I would guess a decent return on the market, he's got a great reputation amongst GMs in the league. He always ranks highly in their voting. Sometimes I disagree with that. There's technical elements to his game I'd like to see updated, but he's a very naturally gifted goaltender. So and he's been a number one. He has played a lot of games and a lot of minutes, and he has played playoff hockey, international hockey. I can't help but look at a team like Toronto, and here's the thing with Toronto. You got Mrazek's deal at $3.8 million. You're going to have to get rid of that somehow. And I think if you're Anaheim, are you willing to eat some salary on Gibson? Maybe not half, but some. Like, would you do that? That could facilitate a move like this, especially if you're a Toronto looking for a place for him to land. So I think it could happen there. Again, I have question marks about that move, and I'm not sure where Campbell's going to go. I think New Jersey is a place that could also work for Gibson. They have a lot of space in terms of cap room, so he's not going to bust them there. They could give up assets if necessary to bring him in, and stability would be a big thing for Gibson. They haven't had that in the crease with Blackwood. Nico Dawes isn't quite ready in New Jersey. So for me, I think Gibson might be a nice fit for a team that's looking to be on the rise with their draft picks and with some of the young players that they have. But I'll throw this one out. What about Vegas? I'm not sure that things ended very well with Robin Lehner last year, and we haven't heard from him. I have no idea where it sits in that locker room. They've got Brossoit, Lehner, and Thompson all within the stable there. I'm not sure the direction it goes. So if the Ducks would eat a little bit of salary, you've got Gibson 5 years left. Lehner's deal was $5 million, Gibson's 6.4. Like, I don't know. I'm just something to ponder, because I could potentially see that being a landing spot if there was a desire to take a big swing in Vegas. But I'd look more towards Jersey or Toronto first.
Really interesting. Toronto's going to be itching to stabilize that position if they do end up letting Jack Campbell walk in free agency, or I suppose I should say if they aren't able to bring back Jack Campbell for next season. The third name we want to dive into is the most veteran option of the bunch, and that's Semyon Varlamov out in New York, Mike.
Well, I don't think that Varlamov is... I don't think he's likely to move. I guess I'll just say that, because I think him and Ilya Sorokin are a really good tandem. And when you have solid goaltending in this league, and especially a team like the Islanders that expect to contend, okay, Lou Lamoriello is not in the business of rebuilding right now. Lane Lamberg wants to make a splash as a head coach in his first year. There's not much behind these two in that organization right now. Corey Schneider's was there last year, but I think at 1 year left, at $5 million from Varlamov at 34, he's probably going to be staying put. But if Lou Lamoriello decides that the return would be good enough to move him on the open market, I could see teams that are, I think he fits with contenders more than anybody here, Tyler. And I think Washington, you look to immediately. I think you also look to Edmonton, and beyond those two contenders. I mean, you could even toss Chicago in the mix, because they don't logistically have a goaltender right now. But I think for Varlamov, he was previously in Washington. He had success there. I'm not sure how happy that club is running with Samsonov and Vanacek into next season. They were shopping Samsonov from what we'd heard last year at points too. So I think he fits there. I think Edmonton, if you're looking for a 1 year Band-Aid until Stuart Skinner is either ready, or like you said, if Mike Smith does go on LTIR and you have to get a proven veteran goaltender, maybe Varlamov fits there. But my money would be on him staying at Long Island, but stranger things have happened.
Very interesting there. I mean, a potential reunion with Washington would be fascinating. And the thing with Varlamov is that he does have some trade protection. And for a goalie
Hmm.
specifically, I think when you're one of those guys who has like a 10, 15 no trade list, if you actually want to stay in the spot you're at, you can probably just be strategic with your no trade list and find a way to put the right teams on there. So it's very hard for your current team to deal with you. I wouldn't be at all surprised if Varlamov goes, "No, I'm kind of happy in New York here with one more year on my deal."
Yeah, for sure. And then, but part of that too, though, is at 34 years old and you only have 1 year left, you're looking for your next contract and you need to play. And Ilya Sorokin, he's going to play an awful lot. So that factors in. Sometimes you're more willing to accept a trade if you think you can prolong a career.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I remember back at the deadline, there were some whispers that, Edmonton had asked, and we're kind of told Varlamov wouldn't waive. If Varlamov sits there and goes, I want another deal after this, he probably gets 15 to 20 more games playing in Edmonton than he does with New York and Sorokin's. That's an excellent point by you, Mike. An excellent analysis, as always, in another edition of the Blue Paint delivered by our friends at DoorDash. Promo codes DFODD and DFODD US get you 25% off and no delivery fees on your first order. Don't cook this week. Just order DoorDash every day like I do. Moving along and getting into our daily face-off inbox question, #AskDFO. It is early, Mike. We are about, 11 and a half months until the next Stanley Cup will be handed out, but it's never too early to give some predictions. So today's question is, who's your pick for next year's Stanley Cup final?
It's so early. I don't even know if I could pick this in January of next season, but man, the Avalanche were a steamroller this year, and they're not going to lose a lot. Like they've actually got more cap space than it looks like, and I think that they're going to be able to run back a lot of that club. They need a goaltender, which it could, by all ostensible purposes, be Darcy Kemper again. So I'm going Avalanche back in the finals from the West, and I'm going to take the Hurricanes. I think that they're due to make a splash here in free agency. I wonder if you bring in a Philip Forsberg, does that change the offensive dynamics of that club to get them over the hump? I think they need game-breaking talent. So I'll go Avalanche Hurricanes, but it's kind of predicated on the offseason, especially for Carolina, to see what they can do.
Yeah, the offseason will change everything. But I look in the West and I just go, even with great off seasons, how can any of these teams find a way to compete with the Avs, who this summer, I'm sure one of Joe Sakic's goals will be to stabilize the situation between the pipes. So imagine this Avs team next year with a good chunk of their core pieces back and potentially better goaltending. I can't see anyone knocking them off. I'm going to go Avs on one side and I'll be lame with the other side and pick a team that a lot of people believe could take a step forward next year. And the only logical step forward is the Cup final. That's the New York Rangers. Shesterkin, Fox, you look at the building blocks of that team. They
Mm-hmm.
pushed Tampa Bay to 6 games this year. I think it's very realistic to imagine a scenario where the Rangers are in the Cup final next year, Mike.
I could for sure. I mean, Gerard Gallant always gets the best out of his clubs, and they are. Rangers are on the upper trajectory here. So I'm fascinated to see where that team goes because to me, it's the young talent, right? How does Lafreniere and Kako continue to go upward? If they can keep that upper momentum, Heedle, that team could be dangerous again next year and even better than they were this season.
But much like the Lightning, they do have some salary cap gymnastics to pull off as well, which is one of the fun things to discuss as we head into the offseason. Let's get into our daily bet segment, courtesy of our friends at PointsBet Canada. Again, 11 and a half months away, but our friends at PointsBet, they absolutely have odds loaded up for who could win next year's Stanley Cup. And heading into the offseason, maybe there's some interesting spots. This should surprise no one that it's the Colorado Avalanche up there at the top, plus 450. The Lightning right behind them at plus 900. The Leafs are up there as well, but as we know with the Leafs and sports betting, that's more a public money kind of thing. So many people wagering on that team to win the Stanley Cup every year with their size of a fan base that they usually do hang around in the top 5 just because of that. But the books really are saying the most likely, matchup next year is the Avs and the Lightning. You got the Panthers and the Hurricanes rounding out the top 5, 10 and 11 to 1. As we work our way down here, Vegas is the next team in the West at plus 1,200, which I think is really interesting considering they didn't make the playoffs last year. Rangers, Wild, Blues round out the rest of the top 10. I love this spot for the Rangers. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and I said it then. The Rangers at that point were like 22 or 23 to 1. They ranked below teams like Edmonton and Boston. And they were so close to the big dance last year that I just go, if the Rangers, again, take that natural step forward, getting them right now at 16-1 feels like it could be a decent spot. Edmonton in a similar position to the Rangers, 19-1 to win the Stanley Cup. Again, they were 4 wins away from getting to the big dance this season. With them, though, I'm not touching it. I don't think that number is going to get a lot better throughout the offseason. I need to see Ken Holland go out and stabilize the goaltending, need to see what the blue line looks like, need to see if they can bring back Evander Kane. If Holland checks all those boxes and the Oilers are still at 19-1, maybe they're worth a sprinkle there. But the Rangers, of all the teams that missed out this year, are absolutely my favorite spot at 16-1, which ties into why, Mike, I predicted them to make the Stanley Cup final next season. And that's going to do it for our daily bet segment over at PointsBet Canada. Got some fun draft props that I'm going to dig into throughout the rest of the week as well. But for now, I'll cede the floor to you, Mike. Garbage time. What do you got?
Well, when the Stanley Cup gets dented, how can it not be that? That's garbage. How did you dent the cup, boys? But here's the thing. The cup's actually been dented quite a few more times than people realize. This is Nicolas Aube-Kubel, my old teammate from the Flyers organization, taking a tumble. And usually you learn how to stop with 2 feet by the time you're maybe pee, squirt, might, but he has a little trouble, comes in, dents the cup, and this party continues, Tyler. But you know what, man? I've always heard stories about some of the legendary parties that the Dallas Stars had with the cup when they won their championship. It ended up at the bottom of a pool, and all kinds of crazy things happened. So I would say that this little dent is a minor detail. And according to our own Frank Seravalli in a tweet he had earlier, the base of the cup apparently gets replaced every year. I didn't know that. So I suppose we're going to see the cup be restored to its shining glory ASAP. But for the next little while here, it's going to be wearing a dent, courtesy of Mr. Aube-Kubel piling into the pile at the end for the pictures.
The dent's not bad, Mike. I'm from Edmonton. I grew up around with the folk stories of what the 80s Oilers used to do with the Stanley Cup. The dent is nothing, I can assure you of that. But it was a great night last night, seeing the Avs players get as emotional as they did. Players like Erik Johnson, Andrew Cogliano. It was fantastic stuff. A fitting end to a tremendous postseason for hockey fans. Tomorrow, for us, Mike, it's off-season time. We're talking rumors, we're talking player movement, we're talking coaches hirings, and that is arguably, for a hockey talk show, just as much fun as breaking down Stanley Cup final games. We'll be back noon Eastern tomorrow. Shout out to Mike, our technical producer, Alex Allard, and Frank Seravalli, who will be back in the big chair 24 hours from now. Enjoy your day.
Thanks for watching the Daily Faceoff Show.
Make sure you hit subscribe on our YouTube channel to never miss an episode.